or isn't as open to listening to others. I mean,
Right.
look, you and I both know no one is successful on their own. We
Right.
all have people who've helped us, who relied on us to help us, achieve, any type of success.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of the Ronin Leadership podcast. I think it's been a couple weeks since I've been able to do one of these. Just been busy with a lot of other things, but really grateful for all of your feedback and your comments on the previous podcasts. And one of the things that you mentioned, a lot of you in the first book, after reading the first book, was that you wanted, the first book talked about leadership from my journey, my perspective. And but now you want to know like how to build a business strategy, how to get the resources, how to build a team. So I'm writing a second book on that. So appreciate the comments and the feedback, and anything we can do to improve this podcast to make it more relevant for you, we'll do. Have to do the shameless plug. So if you love the podcast, please hit the subscribe button. Tell your friends and family and colleagues about it. And also, if you haven't, please pick up a copy of The Art of Ronin Leadership. You can find it on Amazon and other places. But get that aside because there's something even more important that right now. We have a guest today that's a great friend. I consider her also a colleague. Um, we've known her for many years, and the fact that we're able to get her on my little podcast is just an honor. Former chief of police in Seattle, Carmen Best, uh, has just written a book, Black and Blue. It's it's a wonderful book. You should definitely go out and get it. Carmen's been making a lot of the rounds in the media. It's gotten great buzz. I really encourage you to get this book. It's important, especially relevant in today's world. But Carmen is someone that I consider a quality person, a real person, a true leader in every sense of the word, who has been tested. And if you want to talk about resilient, that's Carmen Bess. And she's also one of the best people that you'll ever want to meet. So, Carmen, welcome to our podcast.
Wow, I love that introduction. Mike, thank you so much. And before we jump in, let me just say, thank you for your service to us, both in the public sector and in the corporate setting. You really built an amazing reputation. And yes, we've been friends, and I do appreciate the relationship and the friendship that we've established over the years. And so thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, just for the people listening out there, I actually first met Carmen when I was asked by her predecessor uh, at
Kathleen
the
O'Toole, Chief Kathleen
yeah,
O'Toole at the
Kathleen
Seattle.
O'Toole, right? And we were supposed to do this um, interviewing for your command staff, and I was asked to be the private sector representative. Uh, so interesting times.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
So before we get started with the interview, maybe just talk a little bit about your background, your journey. And I know it takes a lot of twists and turns. I had no idea you were a track star, in high school. I had no idea. I'm not surprised, but I have no idea. But
It
maybe,
was,
what'd you say?
I said it was my passion for a while.
See,
Yeah.
that's awesome. But maybe just talk a little bit about your family background, because I want to get back to that in a little bit. But your family background and what led you up to the point where you decided to become a police officer?
Yeah, thank you for having me again. And, I talk about it in my book, Black and Blue, Leadership Lessons on Breaking Barriers and Racial Reconciliation. And it starts out a little bit talking about some of my history and background. I'm the oldest of four kids. Yeah, I'm the oldest, I'm a girl, and then I have two brothers, and then the youngest was also a girl. All of us are about 2 years, almost exactly 2 years apart evenly. just to get sort of the spread of the family. And, we were close, probably lower middle class, in terms of economics, family. Didn't know it though. I felt like it was, upper class,
Sure.
to speak. We had a home and lots of love and lots of family, that kind of thing. I never felt like we wanted for anything. So, overall, it was a very good upbringing there in Tacoma, where my mother's family has been for, several generations.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I was born and raised there. Uh, like I said, the oldest of four. I went to school at, Lincoln High School, and then had a track scholarship, did a couple of years before going into the military. And so you never know where your path is going to be, but those experiences that I had growing up, both in the large, my extended family, which was large. I had 13 aunts and uncles on my mom's side, and then just being in a community that we were connected then through face to face. There wasn't any technology back then.
Right. Right.
Yeah, so we all just knew each other. You grew up in the neighborhood, you all went to the same schools, you knew each other's families, that kind of thing. And then many of us, played sports together, so we were together a lot and really built, like an extended family out of that. And I talk a little bit about that, what that was like and what it meant to me in different scenarios throughout my life. And really how those lessons that you learn from way back really shape you. And
Hmm.
and as basic as they are, those fundamentals stay true, all the way throughout. So now I'm in my 50s, but some of those same principles, uh, are important that are important now as just as they were back when I was in my teens.
I agree. I agree. There's a passage from your book. Got to put the readers on. We talked about that earlier. So
Yes, we did.
uh, it was in the introduction. It struck me as once we finally acknowledge history, we can find ways to avoid repeating the same mistakes. It is my core belief that mistakes don't start in the actual profession, but much earlier, even before a man or woman chooses to become a police officer or a teacher or a doctor or a social worker. It starts at home and it starts during childhood. Some of the most important leadership principles that I applied throughout my life, especially as chief of police, I learned as a child at home, in school, and among my peers. I think that's very powerful. And obviously you alluded to your family background, but I often don't hear leaders like yourselves or in any leadership position actually refer to family as sort of the basis of good leadership. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, certainly, and there's a lot of different principles to that. But good leaders, as they listen. They respect other people. They respect people's differences. Uh,
Hmm.
they learn to get along and work as a team. They understand their role in the team. All those things I learned when I was a kid. We had to listen to our parents, whether we liked it or not. We had to listen
I
to.
remember.
Yeah, yeah, we follow certain rules, but we also had to respect other people, with other
Mhm.
values, other thoughts. We were a faith-based family. My mom was, but we
Nice.
respected, other people in their faith and in their beliefs, and tried to treat people well. And so, the golden rules, so to speak. But all that applies as a leader.
Yeah.
Leadership is a lot of it is servitude, especially
Mhm.
you get through the ranks, you realize you're not the one doing the work. You're helping the ones that are doing the work to do a good job and support them. So you have to be able to adapt to the environment, and really respect people and meet them where they are. I think it's
Yeah.
important, and those lessons you learn early on, and many of the lessons being involved in sports or communal activities certainly help you where you what your role is on the team. Everybody's not going to be the point guard. Everybody's
Right.
not going to be the starter. All those things. So, okay, how do you fit in? How do you contribute? How do you do your personal best, even if that personal best doesn't make you cross the finish line first? It still matters, right? So those
Right.
types of things, yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's beautiful. I mean, the fact that you point out that the people who are actually doing the work, your job is to support them. And a lot of times leadership is a supporting role, even though your name is sort of at the top of the list, right?
Right.
So that's awesome. One of the other things that I didn't realize about the book, you went into the military. So What made you want to do that? And what branch? What was your MOS? What did you do?
Yeah, I was a 76 Yankee, which is supply, and a 71 Lima, which is administrative, like executive system type work when I was in the military. And I talk about it extensively in Black and Blue. But what I did was I went to college on a scholarship for track. You
Okay.
know, I would have been the first one in my immediate family to finish college, and so I was there, and I was really enjoying myself in a small town at Cheney at Eastern Washington University, and I was in ROTC. And part
Hmm.
of that, in the summer, you would had to go to military basic training to understand what it's like for the
All right.
officers. And I went, and as crazy as it was, I was enjoying myself. I didn't want to stop. So I was supposed to go one summer and then split and then go to your next AIT the following summer. But while
Right.
I decided that I was going to stay in. I let my mom know that, hey, I've decided to take a different path, which they weren't thrilled about it. To be
Yeah.
it's like, what are you doing? But I'm so glad that I did. Like, you never know why things happen the way that they do. Boy, did I learn a lot from those experiences in the Army, working with other women, working in very extreme circumstances, and really pushing and challenging myself in certain areas where I hadn't had to before. I kind of
Hmm.
sailed through everything until we had to zero our weapon, and
Right.
qualifying it, get those three. And I was having a heck of a time doing that, and I wasn't used to that, right? I was young, I was athletic. If you give me a
Right.
ball, I can hit it or roll it
Yeah.
really good at these things. And suddenly I found myself being challenged in different ways and working with people in different ways from all over the world, all over the country, that is. And it was a good experience for me. And so glad that I did.
Yeah, I'm glad. Yeah, thanks for your service. We're somewhat similar. I went to ROTC for a little bit. I went to camp too. I went to Fort Knox for 6 weeks. But back then, they couldn't guarantee me an MOS that I wanted. I wanted either Intel or MP, right? And
Yeah.
so I got out of it. But you're right, the way the path takes you to different. God leads you in different paths, right? Different ways. And
Yeah, absolutely.
so, how did you end up being a police officer? How did that work out?
Yeah. Well, another funny story because I had done my stint in the military, and I was actually working for a major insurance company doing their accounts processing. There's a whole unit that does it. I wasn't the only one, obviously. And the police department was hiring, and they were just like advertising and saying, "Hey, come join us." And I thought, well, that might be interesting. I didn't know that much about policing. I had been in the military, and I went to Fort McClellan, Alabama, where all the MPs get trained. So I
Okay.
some of that, I thought, well, I might want to try this out and see how it is, and it doesn't work out, I'll come back to work at, insurance or do whatever. And so it wasn't, a lifelong dream of mine. And I only emphasize that because as I went through the police academy, so many of the people there, I would say at least 85%, if not more, of the class was like, when they asked, why are you here? And most of them said, I want to be a cop since I was yay high, knee high
That
to
was
an
that was me.
they always wanted it. It was in their family or just something they wanted to do. They had that sort of that white hat syndrome, they wanted to, save the world and do good things. And so for me, I was one of the few that was like, look, I don't know. You may not see me tomorrow if it doesn't work out well today, on that, but here I am, I had spent almost 30 years in the job because I really did find so much good in it. Even
Mhm.
with there's a lot of controversy around policing and some of the issues that we're facing, but I found myself really enjoying the work. I enjoyed, helping people. I
Mhm.
enjoyed some of the excitement of chasing people, the bad guys too, to be honest.
Right.
Uh,
Yep.
and then some of the camaraderie and relationships I was building, both internally within the organization and externally with community members that we got to meet and talk to and really understand, the service that I was providing in many
Hmm.
situations.
Yeah. That's awesome. And it's great that you came in there without having a lifelong ambition. And look at where it ended up for you, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. If someone had told me on day one that I would be the chief of it, it just would not. I mean, there was
Right.
just, yeah, it wasn't there.
You probably ask him, well, what are you smoking anyway, right? Right?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
So in your journey, especially those formative years, and I know in your book you mentioned mentors, right? And then the importance of the people who mentored you. And you don't have to name them by name, but what were some of the things that the mentors in your time in the police department, what kind of things did they do for you that helped you in your leadership journey, self-confidence, or what have you?
Yeah, thank you for asking that because I spend time in 3 chapters talking about mentors and then what I call sponsors and then allies.
Hmm.
And a lot of organizations talk about allyship and that kind of a thing and having good sponsors. So I try to break it down the way I see it, for mentors. But early on, I had mentors, even my coaches. I consider my track coach and my sports coach, they were mentors, giving you advice. I'm helping you to do things like if let's say you're falling short in a certain area, I can figure out
Hmm.
how to get out of the blocks well. They'd help train you on that, teach you to practice, teach you to be patient. That working with others can help you. Those types of things and mentoring you along in that way. When I came on the department, I met, there weren't a lot of women, there certainly weren't a lot of women of color, but I had a lot of encouragement from various people, some male, some female, and who really taught me how to work, how to be engaging and empathetic and dealing with people in all sorts of situations. And you know that, Mike,
Yeah.
officer, you come across a little bit of everything. As a new officer, I didn't write about it in the book, but a story that I never forgot was like I was brand new and it was like Christmas Eve, almost Christmas morning, because all the rookies work nights.
Right. Yeah.
Come across this family who's unfortunately the father was drug addicted and had broken into the house and taken the 3 boys' Christmas presents and sold them to get money to buy, drugs. And the mom
Right.
was very distraught, and I was very distraught, because every Christmas, I have memories of waking up and ripping open the paper and seeing what you got and all that, and so. And I just remember having empathy there and wanting to do something and trying to help her, but it was like Christmas is going to be like a few hours they're going to be getting up. So we were trying to figure out what to do to get them some little things in the middle of the night. And just little stories like that, where you just learn to have empathy,
Yeah.
learn that people are going through things and how you can maybe be a help to them in different ways. So I felt like I grew in that capacity in many ways. I also had people who just didn't want to see you coming either.
Right. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We all experienced that. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. So mentoring was important. In the book, I talk about one of my first sergeants who,
Hmm.
gave me a hard time about coming in late sometimes. It's a true story, and really talked to me on what seems like a minor thing about prioritizing, how you prioritize your work and what's important to you to be at work. But it made a difference. So even as I look back now, as I'm looking back at some of the video, I didn't look as great on some of those interviews as others. But you better believe I was there on time, ready.
Right.
I left a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing how those memories from like decades ago just still stick in your mind, right?
Yeah, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
So I'm gonna take a step back. So you mentioned in the book in the academy, he was in Burien, right? The academy, and how there were obviously not too many people of color in the academy back in those
Yeah.
days, at least in your academy, and how you heard whispers behind your back at certain times.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously, how did that make you feel? But more, maybe not as important, but just as important, for some people, that would have caused them to want to leave. You know, For you, you stuck it out. The resilient piece comes back into. So just you want to speak on that just for a second.
Yeah, it's really funny. It's not funny, haha, but just one of these ironic situations that a couple of the instructors, and of course I don't name them, I remember them very clearly. We had to take like a little test in the beginning, like a vocabulary grammar type test, and then there's a
Right.
spelling. And then y'all are assigned a number, and they list how people scored on the test, but you don't know who's who because the number, only the number that you were assigned. But
Okay.
they knew, the instructors did know who, where we scored. And they were looking at the list and they were looking where my
Mhm.
my score was, which on this particular test was at the top, and they were like, oh, that means she's probably not gonna struggle with anything. She's probably gonna be smart enough to pass. But they weren't saying it in a again, they were like, oh, this is terrible. We're going to have to find another way, because we don't, and it was, and I heard them. And so coming around the corner, because the list is on the wall, and they
Right.
look back and they're like, and the other guy said, oh, I think, be careful. She might be able to hear us or whatever, but or something to that effect. But I did hear them, and it was, disappointing to hear that.
Mhm.
But I never thought once about quitting because of their attitude, right? Or what they wanted. I mean, I really stuck it out, really tried to prove myself. And I had a few challenges. Few people challenged me in different ways along the way. But I also want to temper that by saying I also had folks who were like right there in my corner helping me. It was not a one or the other. It was both and.
Right.
Um, I had some resiliency, but I also had people who were, it wasn't like the whole class was against me or anything
Yeah.
like that.
They
But
had your back. Yeah,
yeah,
people had your back. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess that's, throughout your career, you're very open and honest in the book about warts and all regarding police departments. You have a great deal, a lot of people, men and women dedicated to doing the right thing, and they do the right thing day in and day out, a very hard job. And you have obviously some bad apples every so often, that unfortunately you have to deal with. Uh, but I guess another question for me to you is, at what point in your career did you decide you wanted to become a leader and go into leadership position?
Yeah, I think honestly, Mike, and I know you know this, but I think at many different points there are opportunities to lead,
Mhm.
without even promoting, what I'm
Right.
saying, and I found those to be really rewarding when I felt like I was making an impact and a difference. The decision making in the field, obviously, as you move up, you're able to affect more things, and that definitely appealed to me. Like it's not just me and my little squad now, and us doing our thing. If I
Right.
become supervisor, I can supervise and help, a lot of folks. And if I become a watch commander, even more and more of an impact on what's happening within the organization and more say. So that
Right.
that mattered to me as well. I cared very deeply and still do about the men and women in the organization. As you stated earlier, not everybody's perfect. There were some personalities there that yikes. But by and large, most of the people I have real perspective. Most of the people were working really hard and sacrificing in many ways. It's very few jobs we have to put on a bulletproof vest before you walk out the door. You know,
Amen. Yep.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. And obviously you sent it to the heights of the department. Um, One of the things I think be really great for people who listen to this particular podcast on leadership is, one of the things I talk about in my book, I definitely talk about mistakes I've made, but some insecurities I had, right? I mean, like when I was CSO of Microsoft and we had a great machine going, and then I went into the security industry and joined boards and eventually got to be president of one particular board. Uh, and I look around the table, and I'd been with these colleagues for years on committees and stuff, but now I was president of this one board of 13, 14 CSOs, and I had a moment of pause. I was like, am I good enough? They got the best CSOs around the world, and am I good enough? Can I lead this organization? And
Right.
so, if you could just maybe talk about, because I think it's important from leadership perspective to acknowledge that we all can be insecure. And were there any times when you thought, I don't know if I could do this, but you did it?
Oh, absolutely. There are those moments, and I think now they frame that as sort of the imposter syndrome of like, why am I here? Am I really the one that should be here?
Right.
But a good deal of that. I mean, what I like about having those feelings is that is humility, right?
Mhm.
I'd rather have a person who questioned and thought about it and wanted to make sure that they were doing the right thing for the right reasons than
Right.
someone walking in with arrogance, a know-it-all, as we sometimes call it, who
Right.
maybe isn't as ready as they think that they are, or isn't as open to listening to others. I mean,
Right.
look, you and I both know no one is successful on their own. We
Right.
all have people who've helped us, who relied on us to help us, achieve, any type of success. So I've definitely had those moments. I talk about it in the book when Chief Kathleen O'Toole
Mhm.
said that she wanted to make me the deputy chief. I mean, she was this amazing woman from outside the organization, well respected within the profession before coming to Seattle. Could have chosen anybody in our whole organization, could have brought somebody in. They changed the rules so she could even bring in people from outside the organization
Oh,
into,
wow.
into her top command staff. That wasn't ever done before, and civilians weren't. So she made a lot of those substantive changes, and she chose me. And I was honored and flattered and a little bit, like, are you sure you want to do that? What?
Me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've only been a chief for like a year.
Right.
But she saw something in me and she pushed me. And a big, for me, a big piece of that was not wanting to disappoint her or others. We had this one, a rare situation, not completely unheard of, but rare, where you have a woman in charge and the number two in law enforcement also in charge,
Right.
one and
Right.
two. Well, there's only like 3% women leadership in law enforcement. And so how often is that going to come up? And she didn't feel compelled to sort of kowtow to, like, well, you
Mhm.
gotta put another woman, like it needs to be a guy. She didn't feel compelled to fall into that. She's like, I'm picking who I think is the best person and
Good.
fall where they may. And so I definitely had those moments of, like, am I right? And can I do this? But I remember sitting at my desk, looking out the window, getting my stuff put away and thinking, I'm here and I'm the deputy chief. What? you know, and then it was time to get to work, right?
Yeah.
Getting it done. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's awesome. See, I think a lot of people can relate to that. And as you said, I mean, deputy chief and then chief of a major metropolitan city in this country, right? A lot of different pressures on you. Speaking of
Yeah.
which, so we have to touch on this obviously because I think this was a seminal moment, or one of the seminal moments in your career was in post George Floyd, when we all in cities, we all had different troubles that were happening and protests, some peaceful, some not so peaceful. You were dealing with obviously a major situation in Seattle. Plus, you were dealing with, I think, if we're going to be honest, a city council that wasn't very favorable towards the police department. So I don't think you were
To put it
feeling
like,
the love there, right? And we talked about this. I remember you called us one time, back then, and it was nice to hear your voice, and we were telling you about how things were in Vegas. Not perfect, but from a political perspective, a little bit more friendly towards the police department than what you were dealing with. Um, so you're there now and you're having to do a couple of things. You're having to keep the city safe. You're having to make sure that peaceful protests can take place. You're having to manage the political aspects of the mayor and city council. And you got to keep your troops, right? You have to keep them motivated and keep the morale up in a midst of a situation that could be very demoralizing. And I know you talk about it a lot in the book, but I mean, from a leadership perspective, with all those things happening to you at the same time, how did you approach it? And how did you approach that situation from a leadership
yeah,
perspective?
it was unprecedented. You're
Yeah.
gonna hear that from so many people who were there at the time, but it truly was like we had never been through anything like this before as an organization or anything. And so we really did the back to the basics, like what's our role and mission, what's important, so you just have to prioritize
Mhm.
and then figure out, as you prioritize what steps need to be taken. So if the priority is, for example, we need to make sure the troops stay motivated. Okay, we need to make sure the troops stay motivated, don't become demoralized. How do we do that? Well, we're going to give them, those who are on the line, so to speak, on the front lines, we're going to rotate them out at a quicker clip so they're not standing there as long, so they can
Sure.
get a break, get a mental health break. We brought in, clergy, faith-based
Hmm.
people. We brought in a masseuse at one point which sounds kind of, if somebody told me you bring a masseuse into a precinct, but officers had been standing on the front lines there for hours and hours and hours in
Right.
their boots with all the gear on. So, and most of them didn't even utilize it, but just the fact they knew that we cared enough to do it made a difference, right? They need to know that somewhere somebody is thinking
Mhm.
and appreciating, what the work that they're putting in, right? Especially
Mhm.
since the focus of many of those demonstrations was the police themselves.
Right.
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 So prioritizing public safety, like what are the critical things that we have to do that need to get done? Life safety first, of course. And I know that even at Microsoft, you have that life safety first. And then for us, it was like, how do we stabilize this incident? And then, property was like the lowest thing on our list, although
Sure.
some business owners were greatly concerned about the property. That can't be our focus, on keeping the clothes in the stores right now. We're trying to
Mhm.
make sure that the cars that are lit on fire don't blow up the neighborhood, that kind of thing. So prioritizing, and then, making sure that we, hit all the marks that we need to hit to make things happen. It
Right.
was not easy, to be honest with you. And certainly I didn't do it by myself. I had many, many people helping and contributing, first in my own team around me, but also our federal partners, who aren't necessarily, in the crosshairs the same way that the local jurisdictions are to really
Right.
off of. So it's definitely a collaboration to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, you could write a whole book on crisis management, based on that situation. And I guess an add on to that, and I know you've spoken a lot about that in the media, is, they ask you a question all the time about race relations and police departments and reform. Um, what is your take on police reform and what's needed to mend relationships, and not necessarily every community, but in a lot of communities between the police and say the African American community?
Yeah. Well, one of the things I say is first just acknowledge the history. I mean,
Right.
you can't go into this thing thinking, with an extreme, like,
Right.
police are good and we never did any wrong and how dare you? Because that's not true, right?
Right. Yeah.
Nor can it be like the police are all, a bunch of racists and one KK meeting away from, that either, right? So let's acknowledge what we know. Let's acknowledge the past, that things are, that things have been bad and have been contentious. But also we can acknowledge that they're improving and that we're going to continue to improve. Look, when I first came on, there was a woman who literally could not believe I was answering her call for service. Like,
Hmm.
looking, I'm in uniform, the police car is there, she's still looking for the cop, right? She can't even believe that. And I finally had to convince her, look, I'm the cop that's coming to take this report. It's me, Yeah, I'm ready to roll. And then, I thought about that, many years later, 26 years later, when I was being sworn in as a police chief. That's progress. It was
Right.
a easy journey, and there's some bumps and bruises, but that is progress. Let's acknowledge the progress, that things are getting better, that there's more
Sorry.
to do more. But
Right.
while we acknowledge it, acknowledge that we have some hurdles. And I think that's step number one. We know we got work to do, but let's not just throw our baby out with the bathwater. We've also done some great things too. And
Yes.
we can start doing that. We can start having a real dialogue about how to move things forward. And I think police reform is incredibly important. It has to be transparent. People have to know that officers are being accountable, that the hiring, the recruiting, the training, and the
Hmm.
discipline is all being done fairly and justly. And so I think that's when we start seeing that, and that there will be people who do things wrong, and then there has to be accountability built in. It's not if, but when. And when it happens, you need to know that it's not going to be swept under the carpet, anything like that. That transparency is there and it'll get dealt with appropriately because we all want fair and just treatment and fair and just officers. So I think that will help build the rapport, because if they're looking for perfection, it's not coming. What's going to
Right.
be that we work through the systems that we have. In Seattle in particular, they've been under consent decree for over a decade. And, I really think
Yeah.
it's just way too long. They were using flip phones when the darn thing started. I mean, it's way too long. It should come in, figure out where the real core problems are, address those problems through the monitor process if that's how they choose to do it, but within a certain time frame.
Yes.
It's like if you come in and you're supposed to be fixing this problem and helping the department fix it, and we're a decade in and it still hasn't been fixed, you're probably not the right person for that position.
Oh yeah, exactly. I mean, the problem then is not the department. The department is the person overseeing this thing.
Yeah, yeah, that's how I see it. I mean, it's like come in, figure out what needs to be done, work with the communities, get your stakeholders in, develop a game plan, and start checking off the boxes and making sure that people are doing what they say they are doing, holding people accountable, and put that plan in place. And in the 3 or 4 years, you should be done,
Yeah,
right? And
right,
if that you're not done, then you got the wrong people in place and find somebody else. But it shouldn't be a decade because it loses its credibility. To be
right,
honest,
right. Oh yeah, absolutely. Then it actually is meaningless, right?
yeah.
And demoralizing. So in the last couple of minutes that we have, when you decided to leave the department, I'm sure there were a lot of drivers, but um, what what was the main thing that motivated you to decide to I'm going to try something else? I'm kind of finished with this.
Yeah, my it was a hard decision. I did not come by that easily because I loved, the men and women of the department, loved being the chief. It was such a unique and rare and wonderful experience, even with all the trauma and the
Sure.
drama. I felt very connected and wanted to stick it out. But the final straw for me, we'd gone through a mass shooting, the pandemic. We were the first major city to have to deal with that. And then all of the protests, and then the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, the Capitol Hill organized protests, the defund the police move. I mean, there was a lot happening in that short period
Mhm.
in 2020. But once they started saying that they were going to lay off the officers that we had just hired, that was like, I'm willing to fight every battle, but I could not make that happen. I mean, those
Right.
things were not within my purview, but I wasn't going to be around to be the one to push that through. I mean, that was the end for me. I'm looking at these officers that we had promised a job, usually a 30-year career, that we,
Right.
given them incentive to come to the Seattle Police Department, and we had had the most diversity hiring ever, and now those folks were gonna not have a job. It
Right.
felt very duplicitous and just wrong. And I didn't want to be the first. Here we had our first African American woman chief, and under her tenure and legacy, we lost more women and minorities than ever before. I wasn't going out that way. I felt like I was truly being set up for failure.
Yeah.
Not only was I gonna have that piece of legacy, but also, when you have less cops, you're not as safe. That's just the truth. So now
Yeah.
the crime wasn't changing. But now you're changing our ability to respond to it, and I didn't see a plan. Who's going to replace? If you got
Right.
something else, let me know what it is. But so I thought, that's not what I didn't sign on for that, right?
Right.
That was a hard decision to make. Didn't want to do it. Would probably still be there, but for that. But I just knew then it was time to go.
Time to go. Yeah. I'm sure it was a gut wrenching decision, and I wouldn't have wanted to be in your position, but um, I think your troops knew how much you cared for them, and that it was a hard decision. And so I'm sure they're all very sad to see you go, but I'm sure they all understood
Right.
why it was time for you to move on. But now you're in a different phase in your life, right? And you're doing a lot of things, working in the private sector, written the book, which actually that's one of the questions I want to ask is what did you always want to write a book, or what was kind of the impetus that made you decide to put pen to paper and write
Yeah.
your book?
It wasn't my lifelong dream to be an author, no.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I felt like some of those experiences when I was reflecting back, I mean, a little bit of a unicorn, Mike. Maybe you too, in many ways. It's like there weren't very many women police chiefs. There certainly weren't very many of color. There weren't very many who'd been over a major city. And certainly none had gone through some of those experiences in the end. And as I was reflecting, I was thinking so much of what brought me through that, I learned over the course
Hmm.
of my lifetime. And I wanted to share some of those lessons, some of those themes, if you will. Everybody's got their own story, but
Yeah.
some of the themes for folks. And I just wanted to do it, right? I just thought I really wanted to share that. And in some ways it was cathartic to get it, sort of go over it and get it down on paper and in writing and figure out your thoughts and how things go. And so that was really why. It wasn't a lifelong, ambition of mine, but it felt like the time was right to just talk about it and to write about it.
Well, I'm glad you did. I mean, it's a great leadership primer for people. And I was probably the same way. I never thought I'd want to write. I never was that kind of until quarantine hit and getting bored. So I just decided to do something about it.
Right.
I know you're a person of faith, and we live in a world now that's pretty broken in many ways. A lot of bad things happening, but there's also a lot of good things too. Do you still uh, remain a hopeful person in the
Oh,
future of law enforcement, America, and the world?
I absolutely am very hopeful. I am not the quote unquote Debbie Downer of this. Look, it's challenging. It's
Mhm.
hard. People even now like you left and all this stuff happened and we're reviewing it, they're like reviewing it with the laser focus. But here's the deal, the cops are back in the precinct, and while crime is up, we have people still working. We're still working on the same issues. We've had a different rotation in the administration there, as have many other jurisdictions. So things are moving forward. Things are progressing. The technologies, it gets better. There's more potential for great and more potential for harm. But we know we're
Right.
working through those issues too. I absolutely believe though that these challenges will only make us stronger and better and smarter. And as I engage on occasion with young people, I feel
Mhm.
encouraged. We certainly don't have all the same beliefs about how to move things forward, but I do feel encouraged about the future for sure. And I'm from Seattle, so when I look at the city that's been through a lot of challenges, you
Right.
know, I think in time we'll look back and say, boy, that those years there were tough years, but look how we came through it. We're better for it.
That's great. Yeah, and that's a perfect way to end our chat. Though I do want to mention too about the book, and I do encourage all of you to go out and get this book. What I love about the end of each chapter is your tactical debriefs, because in many cases, and in fact, I was one of them. I kind of went through the traditional talk about it and then some teaching points. You went in there and you asked questions. You position questions for the reader, which I think is awesome because it gets people thinking about what you were talking about. So I think that's a great thing. I think you've got another book in you too, but I'm just saying
I
that.
think I might. I think I might, to be honest with you. We'll see. We'll
Yeah,
see.
we'll see. Okay. Well, well, Carmen, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast. Like I said, I know you're swamped. You got a lot of things going on. So for you just to carve out some time for us, I appreciate it. I really encourage all of you to buy Carmen's book, Black and Blue, and it's a great read. And it's also from a leadership perspective. You want to talk about a leader who's been tested as the epitome of resilience. That's Carmen Bess. Like I said at the beginning, she's also a good person. So you can still be a leader and be a really good person too. So thank you so much. And Janice and I are honored to call you a friend and family.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
You're welcome.